Yes, there we go. Okay, right. Camera's up and running. Hello, everyone. And yes, my name is Ralph Ayton. I have been mapping on OpenStreetMap since 2013. I have been a cartographer all my life, having worked in both South Africa and the United Kingdom for various international cartographic companies. At the present moment, I am the manager of the HOT Global Validator team, and I do the training and assisting of any problems involved with that. I am also spearheading the introduction of a new level of mapper called a super mapper. And this is someone who is way more advanced than the ordinary advanced mapper. So you can understand that these people will be the go-to people for any really complex mapping that we may become involved in. I joined Missing Maps project at the London Mapathon in 2014 when I realized that there were so many gaps in the OpenStreetMap that hadn't been mapped, that there was no ways that I would be able to even make any kind of impression on my own. I joined the Missing Maps project so to teach more and more people how to map. And with more and more people being able to map, we are being able to close those blank areas with some useful mapping. I have been attending the London Mapathons ever since then, so I have been training at what must be coming up to about 250 mapathons. I've trained at universities and schools, and I assist at Portsmouth University for their master's course in disaster management. I am employed by HOT in their special projects unit, where we look at and develop different ways of doing mapping. One of the latest ways we are mapping is with drone imagery, working with the Slum Dwellers International team. And we have started testing 3D imagery and tilt imagery to be able to identify and map the slum houses, which are so close and densely packed that without a oblique view of the side of the building, you can't really tell what's underneath those roofs. So you can understand that that is a problem. I have been asked by Bernard and the Myanmar team to give training here on validation. I will be training on validation, and I will be giving, I think it's 5 separate training sessions. Each one is designed to move on to the next stage. So this stage, I will be not training you in anything. I will be getting your mind prepared for learning how to be a validator. And with that, I pass on back to Bernard to get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot, Ralph, especially for contributing some of his time to supporting the training on validation. I think all of you have had some experience with JOSM. You know how to use JOSM, and this series of training is a bit different. We're trying to break it down to smaller, more condensed training sessions. So there will be about 5 to 6 training sessions focusing on validation with JOSM. Ralph's we'll be focusing a lot on how do you approach validation with with different tools, different methodologies, etc. And I'm sure that this series of trainings will be very helpful for you, even after this project in supporting other mapping initiatives. I'm going to stop here. And before I hand over to Ralph, I just want to also specially thank Joe Zialin. Today's training is a bit special. You'll find out later and when Ralph shares his slides. I would like to thank Joe Zialin for his dedicated time in making sure that the translations have came out right and that you could follow through the training even better. So can I pass this on to you to share the screen? And if you cannot, just let me know. You're muted.
Okay, just give me a moment. I'm trying to get that up now. Right. Bernard, my Slack won't open. Can you send me the link to the slides and I'll get them open?
No problem. Let me send you. And if it's still difficult, don't worry about it. I can share screen.
Okay. Right then. Okay, then would you share your screen then? That would be helpful.
I believe everyone can see it. Sorry. See it now?
Yes.
Right. Thank you, Bernard. As we have said, this will be a validation training. I'm going to switch off my video so that we can concentrate on watching the slides. Right. So we start off. Next slide, please. Right. This is going to be an introduction only to what validation is all about. As Bernard mentioned, we will go through first of all, the various tools that you are going to be using and how to use them. And then we'll move on to what you're actually looking for and the kind of problems that you will find and what to do about them. And hopefully by the end of this, you will have a very good idea of validation. So next slide, please. Right, the first part is to understand when are you ready to start validating. Validation is about checking the mapping of other mappers. It's not about you doing your own mapping. It's about checking other people's maps and to see what is not right. Next slide, please. Right. When you start learning how to map, your full mind is concentrated on trying to understand the new editor that you're using and trying to understand the imagery and how to use the tools to draw what you are seeing. So that takes up your whole mind. This is when you are a beginner mapper. Once you start noticing that other mappers are not drawing or tagging the features the same way as you are, and you realize that they are not right, you are correct, and they are wrong. Once you realize that, you're only just starting to become an experienced mapper, because you are starting to understand what you're seeing on the screen. Once you then get to the point where you start fixing the mistakes that the other mappers are making, before you mark a task as complete. So understanding that when you mark a task as complete, you are trying to say to everyone, I have looked at this and I feel that everything is mapped and it looks good. And that's only the start of when you are beginning to understand validation. When you are checking your own task square to make sure that it's okay for you to mark it as complete, that everything has been mapped and it looks good. That is only the start. Once you become more and more and more experienced in getting that right, and your tasks are being validated quite quickly, then you are showing that you have understood the mapping, you've understood the whole picture, and you are beginning to understand validation. That's when you can then say, have I done enough mapping to be a validator? Have I mapped on a whole lot of other countries to understand what the other countries are about? Have I started to learn new features and understand them, like land use, waterways, highways? Then you are beginning to become a validator. Next slide, please. Right. Validation, as I was explaining, is understanding what you are seeing. It's not, all the buildings are there, that should be fine. It's actually to understand how each of the different features interact with each other. So when you start mapping, you open the task, you read the instructions, you check that the imagery is correct, and then you start looking for features to map. Now, that's the kind of mindset you have when you are mapping. When you validate, it's completely different. Yeah, you go through the same process, you open the task, you read the instructions, you check the imagery is correct, and then you start looking for everything that is not correct. So it's a completely different thought pattern. You are not looking for things to map, you're looking for things that are wrong. And that's a whole new different set of tools that you're going to be using to try and find and identify this. Next slide, please. Right. So your thought patterns are going to be going through various things. You're going to be thinking about how those features that are required. Remember, the instructions will tell you we only want buildings mapped, or we want buildings and highways mapped, or we want land use residential mapped. In the instructions, it will tell you what features are required to be mapped. And you must understand how those required features interact with other features. So in other words, does the highway cross a waterway, and is that crossing correct? Does the building cross a highway? Should it cross that highway? And is it correctly tagged to be able to cross that highway? If it shouldn't, why is it? Okay. Then you also need to understand how to find all types of issues. So it's not just at the building itself. Is the multi-polygon of the building correct? Remember that the inner part and the outer part of a multi-polygon are not locked. So you can take the outer part and move it, but the inner part will stay where it is. To be able to move a multi-polygon, you've got to move both parts. So you need to know that is there an error? Has someone moved the outer part and now the inner is not inside the outer. There's an example of how to find different issues. Understand how to validate the features asked for in the project. So are you going to do a validation across the whole thing, or are you going to concentrate on the features that are asked for? How do you do that? And what other features do you need to take into account while you're validating just the features that are asked for? You will notice that I use a word continuously here, understand. And that is the most important factor of being able to validate. You have to understand what you're looking at. And the last point is, of course, is when you open a task and you look at it, when do you validate that task and when do you invalidate that task? That is another way that you have got to learn so that we can do things correctly. I'll give you an example. If you don't invalidate, you are trying to tell everyone that the mapping is good and there's no problems. However, if you are fixing up everything yourself, you're hiding the fact that there are errors. If there are a lot of errors and you keep invalidating lots and lots of tasks, then the problem is that you need to send a message to the person who's in charge so that you can let them know that there are too many errors happening and they need to write into the instructions so that people make less mistakes. Right. Bernard, you have your hand up?
Thanks a lot, Ralph. I just want to take a short pause at this comment. I think it's very important for the gurus to understand this. So I would like to invite Josiah to also translate some of the statements that you have made. Josiah, Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong. I just wanted to also share this experience with the gurus. With Myanmar itself, the Myanmar OSM community is still growing, and there are a lot more opportunities to learn and improve their mapping skills and experience. By invalidating, you are sending across a message that there are certain errors with your mapping, and there are also rooms for improvement.
Okay. Oh. Wabono. When I go there, I Myanmar OpenStreetMap along the time Kuma growing piano, no, Masabi, Lilani, the Unijaya Koi, no, or especially level hero, Miauja, no, level, who the validation in a Patabi or Roma, validation about that your debut, namely buying the CD, no, can you say it again, Pranet? I call
No,
the second one. Yeah.
By invalidating, you are
Yeah.
sending across a message that that they are making certain mistakes and they can improve on their mapping skills.
Okay. My good validation of the total validation is all of the I'm a solution who retime at the money. How do you improve the way?
As all of you continue to learn and go through all of these mapping experiences, when you invalidate, it's very important that you explain why and help guide the mapper to improve their mapping skills itself. With Bago itself, I realized that there are a lot of mappers who invalidate without explaining, and that's not helpful, especially to the Myanmar OSM community.
ဒီကတော့ဟိုပါဘောနော် validate လုပ်တဲ့အခါမှာပေါ့နော်ဟို invalidate ပေါ့နော်မှားနေရဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုဘာကြောင့်မှားနေလဲဘာကြောင့်မလို့ validate လုပ်လို့မရလဲဆိုတဲ့ဟာမျိုး message အနေနဲ့ message တွေနဲ့ရေးပြီးတော့ပေါ့နော်ဟိုမပြောထားဘူးပေါ့နော်ဘာကို invalidate တော့ဖြစ်သွားတယ်ဘာကို invalidate ဖြစ်တာလဲဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုစာနဲ့တကွာပေါ့နော်တခြားရေးပြီးပို့မထားတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်မလို့ဘာဖြစ်နေမှမသိရဘူးပေါ့နော်အဓိကတော့အဲ့ဘကိုးမှာဆွဲတဲ့ဟာတွေပေါ့နော်
but when you explain to them, be nice because they are also volunteering.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. That statement is not to you. I mean, to the other gurus, when you're invalidating, be nice to them when you invalidate, because they are also volunteering their time. So do not be too harsh.
Okay. ပြီးတော့သတိထားရမယ်နောက်တစ်ခုကကြတော့ပေါ့နော်အကုန်လုံးကဒီမှာရှိတဲ့လူတွေအကုန်လုံးကကျွန်တော်တို့တွေက validate sorry ဟိုပေါ့နော် volunteer အနေနဲ့လုပ်နေတာပြီးတော့ဆွဲပေးရတဲ့လူတွေကလည်း volunteer အနေနဲ့ဆွဲပေးတာကျွန်တော်တော့ပြောတဲ့အခါမှာ message ပေးတဲ့အခါမှာလည်းဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ဒီကြီးနဲ့ကောင်းကောင်းမွန်မွန်လေးဒီလိုမျိုးဘာကြီးမှားနေလဲဆိုတဲ့ဟာမျိုးပြောတင်တယ်ပေါ့နော်ရိုင်းချင်းရတဲ့လမ်းကြီးဒါကြီးကဘာဖြစ်လို့မှားနေတာလဲဒီလိုကြီးလုံးတင်ဘူးဒီလိုမဆွဲတင်ဘူးဆိုတဲ့စကားမျိုးမပြောဘဲနဲ့ကြီးနဲ့နားလည်လွယ်မဲ့စကားလုံးတွေသုံးပြီးတော့ပြောတင်တယ်နော်
Thanks a lot, Josylin. Ralph, sorry, I'm stepping in every time I think that specific things that would be helpful for the Myanmar OSM community. Just correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Bernard. No, perfectly correct. We are here to train the existing people at this, attending this. So whenever you need to, please just stop me and I will continue. Okay, next slide, please, Bernard. Right. To understand, we have to take two things into consideration. We have to maintain the map in accordance with OpenStreetMap standards. These are laid down so that everyone is mapping everything exactly the same, so that the rendering on the map shows correctly. Any searches on the map will be found. For instance, if you tag your building as building equals house, then everyone will be able to find it because that is the regular tagging and that will be easy. If someone accidentally tags it as building equals houses with an S on the end, then that will not show up in the search pattern for building equals house. And therefore the pattern will be broken, the quantity will be incorrect. So we need to check that all tagging is according to OpenStreetMap standards and all features are mapped correctly according to OpenStreetMap. But remember that when we create a project for a specific reason. That reason is to meet the requirements of the people in the field who are doing the job of work. So those people on the ground need certain things mapped, and that's what they ask for. And that's what we need to meet the requirements of. We have to also make sure, so OpenStreetMap standards are important, but we also have to understand what the people in the field need to be able to do their job. And that is what that means. Next slide, please. When you are looking at each task or set of tasks that you open up to validate, you first of all will be looking to see, have all the features that have been asked for been added? So in other words, if it's a building task project, then are all the buildings added? There are ways of quickly identifying this, and we will show you that when we discuss the tools that you are using. The next, are all the features correctly depicted and aligned? When I say aligned, I don't mean necessarily aligned to the background imagery. I mean aligned to each other. Are they correctly depicted? Is a building being shown as a polygon, or is it just a point feature? The last one is the tagging correct? As I explained, if the tagging does not conform with OpenStreetMap standards, then searching for that tagging may be problematic and may not meet the correct. Plus, of course, it may also show up in various validation error function checks. So that's the three things involved in your mind. Next slide, please. Right. I'm often asked, what is a good map? A good map is when all the features are completely mapped. So everything has been mapped that has been asked for. They're correctly depicted. In other words, they are drawn with the correct tool. It's either a point or a node or a multi-polygon or a polygon. They're all correctly depicted. And lastly, that they're in alignment with each other. So in other words, if you have a situation where you have a large L-shaped building on the left-hand side of the road, you have two small buildings and a tree on the right-hand side of the road, then the person driving down that road will be able to say, I know where I am. But if you have not got the big L-shaped building on the left-hand side of the road, you've got it on the right-hand side of the road, then they're going to be confused because that's not what they are seeing on the ground. They'll see on the right-hand side that there's two small buildings and a tree, but there's no L-shaped building there. And so understand that at best your your GPX tracks that you do is around about 5 meters out, and 5 meters can put you on the wrong side of the road. So even with that, an example of a good map is the London Underground map that many of you may not know, but the London Underground map has been drawn as a diagram. The stations that are shown are not in their geographical positions. The distances between the stations are incorrect, and the direction of the lines in between the stations are not correct. But it is the perfect map for visitors to London to find their way around. So a really good map does not necessarily mean that everything is in their correct position, but it is good enough for the people on the ground to be able to use it. Right. Do you want to give a short explanation of that, Bernard?
Do you want me to show the London map? And then I'll get JOSM to wait on. Let me see if I can pull up the example of the map. Train map. Is it called train map? Is this good enough? Well, I think you're muted.
Those give excellent examples of what I was talking about, where everything is stylized and but it's absolutely perfect. Go ahead, Bernard.
So, JOSM, I think the point that Ralph is trying to convey is that there are certain maps where you do not need to show 100%, 1,000% that everything on the same map itself. Certain maps require certain features only, and focusing on those features can allow us to convey a certain message or a certain focus, like a certain message, so that they can better understand how to orientate themselves according to the different stations, according to different nodes, for example, and different landmarks. Ralph, is that good?
That's excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. ဒါတော့ဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ဟိုကျွန်တော်လည်းတခြားတော့နားမလည်ဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ကျွန်တော်နားလည်တဲ့လောက်တော့အားလုံးရှင်းပြကြည့်ကျွန်တော်တော့ဒီမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒါကတော့ကျွန်တော်လန်ဒန်ကဒီ underground ဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ဒီ subway ရဲ့ဟိုပါမတ်ဖြစ်မယ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့အဲ့မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒါဟိုအားလုံးကအဲ့ညီမအားလုံးဒီတရားခိုင်နှုန်းနိုင်လို့ဘာနဲ့ပြောတရားခိုင်နှုန်းဘုံ1000ခိုင်နှုန်းမှန်ရမယ်လို့မဟုတ်ဘူးပေါ့နော်သို့တော်လည်းပဲကျွန်တော်တို့ကအဲ့မှာရှိတဲ့အခုဆိုလို့ရှိရင်အဲ့မှာအရေးကြီးဆုံးကဘာလဲဆိုတော့ land တွေချက်အဲ့မှာရှိတဲ့ သူ့ရဲ့ station တွေကအရေးကြီးဆုံးပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါမျိုးတွေကိုမတန်းတင်ခြင်းကပို့ပြီးတော့ပို့ပြီးတော့ကောင်းတယ်ဆိုရင်ပို့ပြီးတော့ကောင်းတယ်ပေါ့နော်ပြီးတော့လမ်းကြောင်းကဘယ်လောက်ရှိတယ်ဆိုတာထက်ပေါ့နော်တနေရာတနေရာချိတ်ဆက်နေတဲ့ဟာတွေကိုအကြောင်းပေါ့နော်အဲ့လိုမျိုးပြီးထားဖို့ပေါ့နော်
Back to you, Ralph.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. Next slide, please. Right. What do we want to achieve with our mapping? Just remember that in some cases, speed is essential. If we have a disaster, the first 7 days of the disaster is when we are saving lives by putting information on the map so that the first responders can find their way around and find the survivors in any damage situation. But we've got to work quickly. We can't keep holding up the project because we think it's not perfect. As I explained about the London map, it doesn't have to be perfect to be usable, to be useful in the field. So we've got to find a balance between quality and quantity. So the first 7 days of a disaster, we do not want to stop the map because a building is not perfectly square. We need to get that information to the teams in the field. So please remember that we want quality, but we also need quantity. After that, we can then concentrate later on the overall quality of the map. Yes, Bernard.
Thanks a lot, Ralph. I think this is a very good point, especially in reference to the Myanmar earthquakes. So I just want to share additional couple of points. Josiah, again, I would like your help on this. What Ralph is also trying to convey is that different situations call for different balances. With the Myanmar earthquakes itself, we needed speed rather than absolute quality. And there were a couple of things that we had to balance. First of all, if you look at the screen, rather than doing everything, we were focusing on roads and buildings because those were the requested features.
Wow. အဲ့တော့ခုနက slide အရာပေါ့နော်ဟို balance between ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီမြေပုံရဲ့အရေးသွေးနဲ့အရေးအတွက်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဟာနှစ်ခုကြားမှာ balance အကြောင်းပြောတာပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့အများတန်းနေရာတိုင်းမှာအများတန်းအဲ့လိုမျိုး quality ကောင်းနေရမယ်အများတန်းအရေးအတွက်တွေအများကြီးဖြစ်နေရမယ်လို့ပြောလို့ဒီလိုမျိုး emergency map တွေမှာဆိုတော့ဒါကျွန်တော်တို့ကမြန်မှုတက်လိုတာဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်ကျွန်တော်တို့မှာလို့ရှိရင်ဒီ land နေနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့အိမ်တွေကိုအဓိကထားပြီးတော့เนาะထားပြီးတော့ကောက်တယ်ပေါ့နော်တချို့မလိုအပ်တဲ့ဟာတွေကိုကျွန်တော်တို့မကောက်เนาะအဲ့ဒါမျိုးပေါ့နော်
As we continue to also push out data while we're mapping, we also work with validators to continue to clean up the different data throughout the entire Myanmar response.
တော့ကျွန်တော်တို့တွေmap roulette right it's map roulette ကနေပြီးတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကအဲ့မှာ validator တွေကနေပြီးတော့အဲ့ကနေတစ်ခုချင်းအဲ့ကြမှာတစ်ခုချင်းစီသွားပြီးတော့မှအဲ့ကြမှာ quality လို့ပြောလို့ရပါဘောเนาะတစ်ခုချင်းစီရဲ့ဟာကိုလိုက်ပြီးတော့ quality လိုက်ကြည့်ပြီးတော့ဟုတ်ပြက်လားမပြက်လားဆိုတဲ့ဟာကိုတစ်ခုချင်းစီစစ်တာပေါ့ validator.
This might be different in other situations when certain partners will be requesting your help to map certain cities, and you might have a bit more time and space to map more than just buildings and roads.
ချို့ project တွေမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ပေါ့နော်ဟိုအဲ့ထက်မကပို့ပြီးတော့တောင်းဆိုလာနိုင်တယ်ပေါ့နော်ဥပမာအိမ်ကြီးလမ်းတွေအပြင်တခြားသောဥပမာကန်လို့ရေကန်လို့စသဖြင့်အချိန်ကြီးလည်းရှိတယ်လုံနိုင်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တခြား feature တွေပါပြီးတော့ဆွဲဖို့အတွက်ခိုင်းနိုင်တယ်ပေါ့နော်
Yeah, thanks a lot. Back to you, Ralph.
Right. Thank you, Bernard. Right. Next slide, please. Right. When you go into the tasking manager, the first thing that I expect any validator to look for is disaster activations. This is a priority. Remember, I said the first 7 days are critical, and we need you to help to get the maps out as quickly as possible with the best possible quality, so that the people in the field can do their job the first 7 days. Now, we're working on a way of easily identifying which activations should be worked on. But in the meantime, any urgent project will have the information in the title. It will either be floods or earthquake or landslides. So it will actually explain what it is, so that you can see that that is a disaster and should be worked on. I would expect all validators to consider that activations, disaster activations, are a matter of priority over other projects. We do a lot of projects, but a lot of projects do not have the kind of 7-day urgency that a disaster does have. So please concentrate on disaster activations first, and then move on to other validation. Next slide, please, Bernard. Right. Now, the next part is when you are validating, where do you need to concentrate your time? To give you some idea, the hot global validators, there is only 183 hot global validators. There is over 525,000 mappers registered with the tasking manager. You can see the difference. There's a very small number of validators. Of those who are on the tasking manager, the 525,000, only 2% of those, or 10,000, have actually reached advanced mapper status. So you are dealing with a lot of beginners, and it is important to validate the tasks done by beginners, because beginners are the ones that are busy learning. They are the ones that make the most mistakes, and it's important to try and catch those mistakes and give them comments how to correct those errors early on. So if a person has only mapped 2 tasks with mistakes, and you tell them to please square the buildings by pressing Q on your keyboard, then you will, in actual fact, help to make sure that the mapping that they do further on will be correct. If you wait until they've done 20 or 30 tasks, that's 20 or 30 tasks that we need to go back and clean up before they can be released. So please understand that beginners are the ones that need the most help. So we should be, I will show you how to look for beginner mappers and to check their work first. Now, giving both positive and negative feedback is important. These mappers are sitting at home in their room, and they have no idea whether their mapping is good or bad. All they know is that they've drawn something and it looks something like a map. However, if you send them a message to say, thank you very much for contributing your time, remember, they're mostly volunteers and they're mostly contributing their time. So you thank them for contributing their time, and you say, your mapping is very good. Thank you very much. Please keep mapping. That gives that person the knowledge and confidence that they are doing something good, that their work is appreciated, and that someone else is looking and checking. Now, that's important. They know that someone else is looking and checking. That means that if they do make a mistake, someone's going to find it and fix it. It's not as though they're going to make a mistake and they're going to mess up the whole map. So this is important of giving positive feedback and negative feedback. By telling a person, thank you very much for contributing your time. You have correctly identified the buildings on the background imagery, but please remember to square your building by selecting the outline of the building and pressing Q on your keyboard. Please keep mapping. You have conveyed the idea that their mapping is good. They are mapping the correct things. You want them to keep mapping, but there's just one small thing that you want them to correct. Now, that person is not going to be upset by the fact that you have told them their mapping is not quite correct, because you have just given them everything that tells them they are doing the right thing. So please don't just say your mapping's bad or you don't square your buildings, please square your buildings. That is not useful. Remember early on, be polite at all times. You are not just validators checking the work. You are also ambassadors trying to help mappers to keep mapping, to retain the mapping base and keep them mapping. Because without mappers mapping, we don't need validators. So we need people to map so that you can validate. Bernard, do you want to do some explanation here?
Thanks a lot. I want to show this with the others. Josiah, again, I would like your help. I think what Ralph is also trying to emphasize is that besides ensuring that the data is quality, it's reliable and accurate, part of your work, it's also trying to build up the myOSM community. It's also trying to encourage as many contributors to supporting mapping efforts in Myanmar also.
မြန်မာပြည်မှာပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ myOSM လည်းခုမှစပြီးတော့ဟိုပေါ့နော်ဟိုစနေတဲ့အချိန်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့တော့ဟိုပြောမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဟိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီ mapping quality can you say it again, Bernard? I didn't follow it long.
So as gurus, as like veteran myOSM members, your job is not only to improve and ensure that the data is quality, reliable and accurate. It's also about ensuring that you can help grow the myOSM community, and you also can help encourage more and more global mappers to supporting mapping in Myanmar.
ပြောချင်တာကတော့ဟိုတူတူနဲ့လိုရင်းပဲကျွန်တော်ပြောရမှာအဲ့တော့ပြောချင်တာကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကမြေပုံဆွဲဖို့တွေမဟုတ်ဘူးပေါ့ validate လုပ်ဖို့မြေပုံ mapping လုပ်ဖို့တွေမဟုတ်ဘူးကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့အဖွဲ့လေးတိုးတက်လာဖို့အတွက်ဒီ myOSM အဖွဲ့လေး group ဖြစ်လာဖို့အတွက်ပြီးလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့အဖွဲ့တွေကိုတခြား member တွေကနေပြီးတော့လာပြီးတော့ကူညီရဖို့အတွက်ကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ကကြိုးစားရမှာပေါ့နော်
And this screen that I'm trying to show you right now, I will share with you the gurus eventually. But this is a good way to track the number of buildings that have been mapped, the roads that have been mapped in the from between a period of time. So when the gurus have joined us in June up to 30th, right today, up to today, we have seen more than 400,000 buildings mapped itself. And we would know that there were more than 400 volunteers mapping, trying to work with all of you to contribute all of these different building data and road data itself. So we cannot do this without our global community.
ဟုတ်ဒါတော့ဟောပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ OpenStreetMap နဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ tracking လုပ်ပြီးတော့ဟိုပြန်ပြီးတော့ကြည့်လို့ရတဲ့ website တွေတခုပေါ့ OSM ဆိုတဲ့ website အဲ့မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့တွေဒါဒီစုပေါင်းဟောပေါ့နော်ဟိုလောက်ထားတဲ့ဒီဆွဲထားတဲ့အိမ်ရေတွက်တို့ပြီးလို့ရှိရင်စုပေါင်းဘလောက်တောင် contribution ပါထားတဲ့ဒီရေတွက်ရဲ့land ဘလောက်ထိဆွဲထားရဲဆိုတော့ land ရဲ့အရှိဒါမှပြထားတာပေါ့နော်
So in part, when you are giving your comments and feedback, you have to both give them feedback to improve, but also positive feedback on what they did right as a way to also encourage them to contribute more.
အဲ့တော့ဟိုခုနကတော့ဟိုပြောတော့တဲ့ slide ထဲမှာလည်းဒါပါတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟိုအများနဲ့ဟိုပြောမှဆိုအပြုသဘောဆောင်တဲ့ comment မျိုးပေးစီချင်တယ်ဗျာနော်ဟိုဒီလိုမျိုးများဟိုဒီ blame ပြီးတော့ပြောတာထက် positive ပေါ့နော်ဟိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီသဘောဆောင်တဲ့ comment တွေကိုသုံးချပြီးတော့ဒါ encourage လုပ်တယ်နော်
That's all. Passing it back to you, Ralph.
Thank you. Can we go? Yeah, there we go. Next slide, please. One of the tools that we will be using extensively for our validation is the tasking manager. The tasking manager is something that you will need to find your way around and get to know the various functions in the tasking manager so that you will be able to find the beginner mappers and find the projects you need to work on, and be able to assess how far they have been mapped and validated and how much more needs to be done. So the tasking manager is one of the tools that you will be using. Next slide, please. Right, the two editors that are most in use are the JOSM editor, the Java OpenStreetMap editor, and the ID editor. Most beginners get started off on the ID editor. So it's important, but the JOSM editor is the one that we use for validation because it has all the right tools and plugins and map paint styles and additions to help you to find the errors that you are looking for. The ID editor does not have all that. However, you will need to have some knowledge of the ID editor because you will need to give instructions to beginner mappers how to correct their mapping. So it is important that you have an understanding of the ID editor and how things get mapped in the ID editor. But you need to know the JOSM editor and all its tools and functions so that you can do the validation. JOSM is the important editor. ID editor is needed to help give instructions. Next slide, please. Another tool that you will be using is the Wiki map features page. Now, I know that there is a lot of people out there busy telling you to use the Africa highways, to use different ways of identifying correctly how features should be mapped and tagged. But the one that you must go to as a validator every time is the map features. This wiki page is very user-friendly and gives you a concise and precise information about how each feature should be mapped. And I will be teaching you about the map features page in one of the future lessons. Next slide, please.
I believe that's the end already.
Ah, that's the end. Okay, we've done that in very good time. I'll hand back to you, Bernard. And if there are any questions, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Ralph, for this training, introduction to validation and with JOSM and the various different tools itself. For our gurus in the coming months, coming weeks, we're continuing to dive down to specific topics per session. The idea that we wanted to work on, the reason why we are doing this is that we want to break down the video into smaller sections so that you can watch it at one shot, rather than doing a 3-hour training session. And some of you might have challenges with your video and internet connection. We're trying to break it to smaller parts over the next few weeks. So I look forward to attending the next session with Ralph on validation itself. At this point, I want to check, does anyone have questions with Ralph on validation?
Bernard, I have one question.
Yes, please do.
Just like a presentation, just for example, like a slide number 9, it would be great if we show, if we use some example a place which has a good mapping, like in JOSM or in ID editor, so we can see which is a good mapping and good mapping practice. So then rather than saying with what, so people won't be see so a picture a picture say 1,000 watt. So yeah, if you can show us example picture of a good mapping, so it would be great.
Okay, unfortunately, we are about to shift to the Mapathon itself. So what I can do is that I will add this slide to I will work with Ralph to get examples of good mapping and add to this slide itself. I will upload the slide to LearnWorld so that everyone can access. Will that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your your suggestion. Any other questions? As usual, I continue to emphasize, if you have any questions, don't worry, reach out to me over email, WhatsApp, or Teams. It could be through English or Burmese, and I'll convey the question to Ralph, and we'll respond to you both in English and Burmese. I guess at this point, I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to thank Ralph and especially Josiah Lee for his translations. And we'll see each other again in the next validation training. Ralph, any closing statements?
Yes, I would just like to say thank you for your attendance, for your interest. Every person who comes on board to help with the validation is 100% guaranteed to be appreciated. This is something that not everyone is capable of doing, and it can be a bit upsetting if every single day you are looking and finding mistakes and mistakes and mistakes. We tend to then become a little bit depressed. But I say to my validators, just remember, for every 100 mistakes that you find, there's more than 1,000 that are good and you don't need to find. So our method of validation is to look for mistakes, and we will find them. But that doesn't mean to say that everything is bad. If you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all the mistakes you are finding, please stop validating, go back to doing a bit of mapping and calm yourself down, and then come back and do validation. Being upset by all the mistakes makes you angry, makes you not think clearly, and start to resent the people who are making the mistakes. Please do not get this wrong. You are doing a great job, and they are doing a great job. I will quote a member of the Médecins Sans Frontières team who said that a poor map is better than no map at all. So even if not everything is correct, just remember we are still able to help them. And please pace yourself. Don't let yourself get down, and give yourself a break. Back to you, Bernard.
At this point, could I invite Rolf as you go through, let's see, Rolf, as you go through validation of certain tasks, perhaps could you share your screen and just share some of the thoughts that you have in your head as you are validating some of the tasks?
Right. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Lovely. Right. What I do is, first of all, I go into my project. So here we have the project you are working on, Bago Township. I go down to my contribute, because I can see here that 57% has been mapped and only 11% has been validated. So there's quite a bit of validation that is needed here. So I go to my contribute down in the bottom right, and I press that, and I come up on the task page. And here I see that there's a lot of mapping that still needs to be done, but there is quite a lot of blue task squares here. Now, we have a live mapathon. A live mapathon means that the people who are mapping are here and now. So these are the people that it would be important to give immediate backup to and to let them know what their mapping is. How do I find who is mapping at this very moment? So what I first of all do is go on the very left of the screen here. You can see tasks, and I click on tasks. Now that comes up and it shows me a list of people who are mapping right now. I can see who has done it a minute ago, 2 minutes ago. So I can presume that quite a few of these are in actual fact in this mapathon. If I wanted to cross-check, I could call up the people who are in attendance and just check if one person is. For instance, Leon K. I know Leon K. He's a well-known person in our project and mapping and creates projects, but he is not in attendance. I don't see him in attendance on this mapathon.
Yeah. Leon K is JOSM.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I won't check Leon K because I know, but what I want to do is to find out who I want to be able to check. And to do that, if you go to the contributions page, and you will see here all users, and I will say, no, I don't want all users, all levels. I want beginner mappers. So I want to find all the beginners who are busy mapping here. I can see that some have done quite a lot of mapping here, but if you are new in this mapathon, then you will be working probably on your first or second. So I scroll down and I find who's only doing one. Okay, and I can see that there's quite a few who are doing one. I can select that task and have a look. What tasks do I want? And I want mapped tasks. So this person has marked this as mapped, but it has not been validated. So I am going to go to this task and see if I can see where it is. All right, I don't quite quickly see where this task is. It is not easy to see. So what I will do is I will JDIJ. So I can go back to tasks and type in here JD, no one, J, there's JDIG, and they mapped 2 months ago. So that person is not in this mapathon. So you can see that I need to go back to most recently updated and get rid of that one. So I want to see most recently updated and ready for validation, and get rid of that name. And I see here that certain people have been mapping. Here is one that was 3 minutes ago, ready for validation. And I will validate the selected task. And I have JOSM selected here because I'm validating. And it takes me to there. And I read the instructions. I do see general instructions that we're doing highways and buildings. They've got here, before modifying any existing data, check its history. That's a good point to make. The other thing, of course, is to select that and check the tagging. Does it have any local knowledge tagging? Does it say it's a shop or a house or an apartment? So check if there is any local knowledge tagging as well. So in there, I would select the item and check the tagging as well as looking at the history. Right, now, if you're using the ID editor, this is a very important one to remember. Do not use layer. If it's, I know the ID editor does suggest that you use layer if two things are overlapping. Now, with buildings, do not use layer. With waterways, do not use layer. With highway, do not use layer unless you know what you're doing. It is not good for the entire length of the highway to be layered 1 or -1, or a waterway to be layered 1 or -1. That is not good. Okay, so please do not put layer on building, except in very, very special cases, but I'll explain those special cases once you become a more advanced mapper. Right. The other thing that I noticed, imagery instructions. Okay. As Bernard was telling you about the imagery, some things won't quite align with the imagery. It would be helpful here if the instructions actually told us to move the background imagery to match up with the existing mapping, or should we move the existing mapping to align up with the imagery? Now, there's no instruction here, so we have to just see when we do our mapping that we get things to align approximately with each other. Right, so I am now going to go back to the mapping. Now, I've called this up on JOSM, and here it is. It has appeared on my JOSM, and I can have a look. Now, the best way to understand your zoom in is to have a look up here on the top left of your JOSM, and it's got a little scale bar, and it says 30 meters. If you are zoomed out at 50 meters, this is not a good level to start checking. You are a bit too far away. So you need to be at 30 meters or less to be able to have a look. And the first thing that I see is right here is that there are buildings missing. And there's a small building there, and that could be a haystack or a building. And I look in the town here and I see that is a building. So I am seeing that this is not complete. Okay, those buildings look good. Those buildings have been done, well done for this mapper. Those are correctly drawn at the right size and the right shape. So that is excellent. Well done. Okay, so this has not been completely mapped because I feel seeing some buildings that are missing. This asks for highways as well. So I would expect the highways to be looking good. I can see that unclassified, that is correct in this area. I don't see anything coming off to bring you to these buildings, but these buildings are isolated. So that would be a service road to these buildings. and it probably a driveway, because this would be a single farm. So to me, this looks good. The alignment of the roads are pretty reasonable. The history of the roads. Now, is that correct? I can see that this joins in at a junction here. Is that junction correctly depicted? To me, it looks right. I don't know yet if that is a main road. It comes off the main road, but I don't know which one is the main road and which one isn't. I would have been more comfortable to see this road split at that point, but I'm not going to quibble over that. I'm going to leave it for the moment and leave that up to local knowledge. So on the basis that this is not an urgent project, I want to see who completed this building. Right, so I go back to have a look on the history, all, and it says this mapper closed this off as being complete. So what I want to do is in completion, I will say no, make a comment at okay, I pick the person who marked this as complete, and I say thank you for contributing your time to this project. You are so I say thank you. You are correctly identifying the buildings and drawing them correctly. Okay, so unfortunately, you have missed some buildings along the road. Please go back and add them. Okay, and I submit this task. So it will invalidate the task, and hopefully that mapper will get a message to say that your task was invalidated. I would appreciate it if that mapper actually goes back and adds those buildings and resubmits it for validation. But of course, because this is now clearly marked yellow, as some other tasks are marked yellow, any one of us at some stage can say, right, someone's not going back to fix that. I'll go back and fix it. And someone else more experienced can go in and fix the mapping for us. But at this stage, hopefully the person who completed the task will go back and have another look to see what they have missed. Okay, right. So I can get rid of that task and then go back and go for another task. So you can see that I look for completion. Now there is a way. I want to see if there is a very busy area. This might do. Right, I can see this is a very, very busy area, and there's a lot of buildings here. I want to know if there are any buildings that have been missed. So what I will do is I use my select tool and I drag a square around the whole task square and I let it go. Now I can see that everything gets highlighted. So what I want to do is zoom in, and I can see here there's a building there that has not been drawn. I can see here that there's a building here that has not, and there's a small building there. So I can see, because everything is selected, I can quickly see where things are that have not been selected and identify that whether there is a building there or not. I see here that the temples have had just the minaret drawn, the circular minaret on top. However, the building at the bottom is not shown. I would prefer them to show this as the square. That is a wall around it, and there's a square building below the minaret. If I zoom in a bit and I switch off, I can see that that is the building around it, not the round minaret on top. So that's something to check as well, that it is actually the building and not just a feature on top of the building that has been drawn. I can see here that there's a place of worship alongside it, and that is amenity religion. Okay, but this is just man-made stupa. The this feature, this point feature, should in actual fact be inside the building to indicate that that is where that is the building that this religious worship takes place. So that's what I would have thought I would see, but it's not quite right there. So you can see by selecting all, you can do that simply by saying Control A, and it will select all as well. So you don't need to drag a square, just use Select A. It will do the same job. And I can see here, there's a building that isn't, so there's quite a few buildings dotted around here that have not been done. There's one that overlaps but has not been added. Now, how do you check? There's an offset here. So how do you check if there is a building there? So what I will do is I will zoom in. I don't want to take up too much. So I zoom in, and I am now going to want to look at that building. So what I do is I go to the green arrow on the top left, and I click on that, and the Slippy map comes up, which says you are going to select this area. I don't want to download it as a new area. I want to add it to my existing layer, so I don't want it as a new layer. So I click download, and it will go to my active layer. Now I can see that that building was not mapped, and the person who mapped this task thought, oh, I leave it for the person that's going to do that task, and this person has left it for the person to do on the other side. So look along the borders to see whether there are buildings complete, and just check beyond the building by using your Slippy map to download the extra area so that you can see that you're not duplicating buildings. So this is a very good example. I can see here again, there's more buildings here. Now I can see there's a building here. Is there something on the other side? Once again, I go to my Slippy map and I say I want to download this area, and my OSM data is selected, so I download. Make sure that you've got OpenStreetMap data ticked so that that's what you will get. Okay, and I have a look, and no, none of these buildings have been mapped alongside either. So I can see that there is quite a bit of mapping still needs to be done. So I will invalidate this task with a note to the person that completed that not all the buildings have been mapped, and would they please kindly check and map the buildings that have not been mapped. Okay, now there's another thing. By selecting all, okay, you can see here, if you go to the left, and there's a little node there which opens a list of all the people who have worked on your selected projects. So I can see here that I have got a whole list of people who have been working in this area. That's quite a lot of them. It's quite a busy area, and it would have been done over, but I can see that the top one here has done 64% of the mapping. Let me check most of the mapping is correct. So I select that person and I go to select at the bottom and I click on that, and I can see that this person has done most of the mapping here, quite a lot, and it is quite good. All the buildings are squared. Most of them look in alignment with the imagery. So I haven't got no complaint. This person will get a comment from me saying, well done, thank you very much for your contribution. Please keep mapping. You're getting it all right. So that is examples of what I would be doing with this mapping. If I want to check that all the roads are connected, remember the SatNav and routing software can only connect you to roads that are connected to each other. So if a road is not fully connected to the network, then the SatNav will not be able to take you there. The way to identify that quickly is to select a highway that is running through your map, Control, Shift, and press E, and it highlights all of those that are connected. So I can see that this one-way road here is connected to all the roads in this task, which is very good, and that means that the SatNav should be able to function correctly. Okay, if I want to check the other side, I then select a different one, Control Shift E, and I can see that that road is also correctly connected. So the SatNav should be able to find directions along those highways. Right, okay, I will stop sharing now and let you guys get back to mapping. Thank you very much for watching, and please keep mapping.